Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CJV webinar. Today, I'm honored to introduce a very special guest, Congressman Rich McCormick, who proudly represents Georgia's 7th Congressional District in the House of Representatives. Congressman McCormick is a decorated veteran. He served for over 20 years in the U.S. Marine Corps and the Navy, in combat zones in Africa, the Persian Gulf, and Afghanistan. He's a pilot, a Marine commander, and an emergency room physician. He's the father of three boys and lives in Suwanee, Georgia. The McCormicks are members of the Cross Point Church. Today, the Congressman is going to be sharing with us his foreign policy insights, particularly on Iran and Venezuela, and discuss the latest developments for about 35 minutes today. While we're having the conversation with the Congressman, I ask you to please go ahead and submit any questions you may have in the chat box. And we're going to try and answer everyone's question before the end of the webinar. But we're going to be stopping exactly at 3 o'clock as the Congressman has another event to attend. With that, I'm very pleased to begin the conversation with the Congressman.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I believe that this is one team with one fight, one objective. This is good versus evil. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the world right now. I don't think we've ever seen such a evil regime as the Tehran regime since probably World War II. What we have at stake right now is the stability of an entire region and indeed the world. If you look at the demonization of Israel, and you talk about eliminate a nation, not to mention a race, we often in America forget that although Israel is referred to as the little Satan, we are the big Satan, and that there is no bigger fight where we know who our friends and our enemies are. I have specifically talked to the president and his staff about strong arming the Tehran regime, toppling it. I make no qualms, make no apologies for stating that. I don't believe that this regime needs to be in existence. I'm as hardline as you get because I believe they're evil. I believe and I know that they have killed Americans. I know that they intend to destroy our society, the very fabric, the very morality that we believe in, the freedoms, the God-given rights, not the rights given to us by a constitution, but by God himself. That's what this battle is all about, to protect those rights, to protect the independence of our thought process, our belief system, and even our existence. I know we have a carrier group that's in place now. I hope we act with it, not just use it as a negotiation tool. I don't want peace with these people. They don't want peace with us. And I believe that until they're gone, you will continue to have the funding of not only Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah, but you'll see terrorism throughout the world. You'll see destabilization throughout the world. And that includes over in the Western Hemisphere because they reach everywhere. So I don't have any problem with any sort of force that we can bring, any sanctions we can bring, anything we can do to bring these guys to their knees to allow the uprising, which I think is very naturally occurring, which I have heard several tens of thousands of people have been killed, people with no weapons, just rising up in defiance of a government that's oppressive and evil. And I think the time to act is now. There's not a better time in history, in modern history anyway, for a people to rise up against an evil regime that would change everything in that region. And I think change truly the course of this world in a better way. So I'm praying and hoping that the president takes advantage of this time. And that's where we're at right now. As far as Venezuela goes, it's a different country, different scenario. I believe that there's still a regime there that doesn't really want us to have what we want. They want to oppress their people. They are absolutely a communist / dictatorial regime that I think will be voted out if they have a legitimate election. I think we need to demand that. I understand that we're playing ball, but that's just because they have no options. Ultimately, the people need to choose better leadership. I hope they will in this next election, and that will solve the process there, or actually begin to solve the process there. There's no guarantee that when you replace a government, you'll get a better one. But I have high hopes because I don't think there's much worse they could have over in Venezuela. But we also have problems in Brazil, Cuba, Central America. The Western Hemisphere is a bit of a mess. And so we do need to instill or exert our forcefulness in these regimes when it comes to the way we trade, the way we bargain, our negotiations. The Monroe Doctrine should be alive and well because this is the Western Hemisphere, and you can see a surprising amount of both Russian and China influence in this area, not to mention Cuba. When we toppled Venezuela, or sorry, when we took out that regime, at the top at least, the regime's still in place, but almost everybody guarding him was Cuban. They're exerting their influence throughout the region of Central and South America, and that could be problematic for us and for our future. As you know, that any communistic or dictatorial regime, any autocracy tends to pick on freedom and tends to pick on the Jewish and religious communities. So this is a fight worth having. We know it's not going to go away if we bury our head in the sand. They're not interested in peace. If they were, we could solve this very quickly. We've always said many times that in Israel, if you had all the Palestinians and lay down their arms, you'd have peace. If you had Israel lay down their arms, you wouldn't have Israel. The Jews wouldn't exist anymore. So we have a clear motive and a clear double standard by the other side, and that's what we're rising up against. With that, I want to open up to the floor and give as much time to questions and answers as you might have. Not everybody in Congress shares my thoughts. We have several people both sides of the aisle that believe in isolationism or believe in Palestine more than they believe in our alliance with Israel. You've seen tens of thousands of people in America rise up in defiance of our friendship with Israel, called to the end of Israel. And truly, even the strangest of bedfellows, whether it be transgenders and lesbians and homosexuals, whether you think that's okay or not, the fact that they think that they're going to have a friend in Hamas is the insanity and the misinformation that's out there. And we've never seen anything like this since the establishment of Israel, never even in the beginning here in the United States of this anti-Israel sentiment. It's never happened. And we've had problems, we've had biases, but never to this extent where you had tens of thousands of people on the streets chanting. And that's why immigration is such an important part of what we do into the future, that we don't bring in people that are really oppositional to what we want, to the fabric of our society, to this strong relationship between Israel and the United States. And with that, I open it up to questions.
Oh. Before we get to questions, thank you very much for that conversation. We're going to hand it over to Rabbi Menken, our Executive Vice President, for a few minutes, but don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back and we'll ask the questions. So please put more questions in the chat box. Rabbi.
I apologize. I had to fix my video to be able to rejoin you. Want to thank everybody for coming today, and of course for Congressman McCormick for your remarks today. It really is a great fight that we're in, and we really appreciate your leadership in Congress in this fight. And for everyone who is here, obviously our ability to run webinars like this, the fact that we have the honor of having Congressman McCormick with us is a sign of our growth, our increasing voice in Washington, of the road ahead, which is very, very exciting for our organization. I want to make sure that everybody realizes that we cannot do this without your help. How important it is that everybody participate in strengthening this organization. There are campaigns coming up ahead where we hope that you'll play a part. But of course, most easily, most critically, is simply visit our website and see that donate button in the upper right-hand corner. Just give it a click. Let us know that we have your support. We really appreciate what you're doing, what everybody has done for this organization, helping it to grow. We are in an unbelievable position based on where we started just 9 years ago. But obviously that's because the need for this organization is truly as great as it is. So thank you everybody for participating today, and we hope you will support us so that we can be even stronger going forward. And now I'm going to turn the floor back over to Mark so that he can ask questions from the chat. And please continue to put your questions in the chat for Congressman McCormick.
The first is not a question, it's a comment. Somebody wanted to express their appreciation for taking a stand what is clearly right, even when it's not fashionable or convenient. I think everybody that's watching this webinar probably agrees with that sentiment. The first question is a two-part question. How is Venezuela and Iran linked together? And how does the embargo of the Venezuelan oil affect Cuba, Iran, Russia, and China?
Hmm. All right. So first of all, everything's linked internationally. When you talk about international and foreign affairs, uh, our enemies are both linked financially. Their best interest to defeat the United States, so they'll do whatever they can to combine forces, share information, um, look for that synergy against what we believe is our synergy with our allies. As far as the embargo for the oil, we are allowing some oil to go through to be sold to repurpose those funds for the people of Venezuela. It's not being used as a slush fund. It's being used to go back to the people of Venezuela in ways that can grow their democracy and straighten out their woes. Um, that's a bit of a tip of the cap. But when it comes to Cuba, that's one of the criteria. No more Cuban influence, no more of their I want to use some dirty words here, but I'm going to be very careful. But none of their influence should be allowed in this country that's already in tatters. They copied Cuba's model because it's a dictatorial sort of. Basically, they cheated the last elections openly. The people rose up against them and they sat them down. And I worry about the same thing in Brazil. But the influence of Cuba, communism, and that goes with China and Russia, which is their philosophy, cannot be overstated. And that's in the Western Hemisphere. Very important that that doesn't spread and become problematic to our way of life. We are going to continue to exert our financial influence as best as we can. We're a $30 trillion economy. Uh, when you talk about the two next economies between Russia and China, China has about roughly $18 trillion economy, which has grown tremendously in the last 15 years. Um, Russia, though, is stuck at about 2.1 trillion and they're suffering greatly. Now, China's going to have some problems with financial in the future, but if you look at Russia, they have a smaller economy than Texas. A $2 trillion economy versus Europe's $20 trillion economy. The problem is, and this is something I want you all to be aware of, Europe is losing itself. The traditional Judeo-Christian ethics and population of Europe is dwindling, and the Muslims are growing in leaps and bounds. And some of those people are peaceful. The problem is as we've seen in other countries that are generally peaceful, you have a small percentage of violent people that would oppress everyone else. And as soon as they become large enough to gain that access to weaponry and suppression of the people, they will. And that could be in Germany, which is the third largest economy in the world right now. They have 2.5 times the economy of Russia. But in a very short period, and don't count Great Britain out, you could have the Muslim population in both Great Britain and Germany basically rule the day. That'd be the largest economy of Europe. That could be precarious. So we need to continue to stand up against destabilizing regimes, never let them have nuclear arms, and to make sure that we're securing our place in history, both economically and militarily, if needed.
Here's a really good question. Uh, if and when the Islamic Republic falls and there's a free Iran again, what is the chances that Turkey will take the place of the Islamic Republic of Iran?
Well, we won't let that happen. They need to have their own legitimate elections. The people of Iran don't want Turkey to rule them. They don't. If you have a legitimate election, which I think if the Tehran regime were to fall, then we would have an international interest in making sure that the next elections are fair, that they're democratic, and most likely what would happen, just based on what we know, which is of course limited in some ways. I think they probably end up with a democratic monarchy, is what I think. Something similar to what they had before this uprising. Um, but that's just a guess. The people will have to determine that. I'm sure there'll be a lot of money spent and arms twisted to make that happen. But I don't think they're going to turn to Turkey for their leadership. I don't think this is the same kind of um, influences you have in Iraq, for example, where you have a lot of people trying to exert the Shia versus the Sunnis, and how you legitimately get an election where you get a government that works with the United States, works with Israel, hopefully joins the Abraham Accords. I think Saudi is on the verge of that, and I think that would be very good for that region. The more we work with people, the more people we do business with, the more humanized we become, and the less demonized. But I think when that regime falls, I don't think that Turkey would be the main influencer.
Here's a really good question. I don't think anybody has the answer. What is the closest thing to the actual number of the Iranian people that were slaughtered?
Yeah,
Does
I've
anybody
heard
have an idea?
I've heard through multiple levels, and I've seen footage over there of the bodies just lining the streets. It's tens of thousands. Some people, the highest estimate I heard was around 80,000. Person said 100,000, but I don't think there was any uh, factual basis of that. But it's tens of thousands of that, I'm sure. I know that the reports are absolutely muddled, that they control all of the internet going in and out of there, but some people are sneaking videos out that are abhorrent, just frightening. And the people, when you start doing that to a people that's unarmed, it doesn't wear well. I mean, I just think their days are numbered, and I hope their days are numbered because um, it's an evil, evil against their own people. And I think the Iranian people would be a good friend in that area. I think you're always going to have problematic people, but I think if we could topple that regime, we'd be much better off. And I think it's tens of thousands to answer your question in short order.
Here's another question about Turkey. Um, how do we reassert democracy, which no longer exists under Erdogan?
Yeah, it's problematic. Actually, a very good friend of mine is uh, a former NBA player who's from Turkey who spoke against the regime there, and he's basically his family's isolated. We get put in jail if he even contacts them. It's a pretty horrible position because they're not acting like a democracy. They're not working like a NATO ally. They were the last ones to allow Sweden into NATO, which requires a unified vote. I'm a NATO parliamentarian myself. Turkey's problematic. They're still working with us. Of course, we do business with them, but it's a very strained relationship. And the reason we don't dissolve contact with countries like Pakistan and Turkey like that, because if we leave that void, then it gets worse, not better. It doesn't mean that they're in good shape. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily friends, but we can't just leave them for Russia and China to pick up as basically allies. That would be a dramatic shift in policy and world power that we cannot allow. So even though we may not like what Turkey does, we may not like what their government does to their own people or to NATO or anything else that they're trying to influence, it's far better off for us to stay intertwined with them, to stay at least on the surface friendly. And like I said, I deal with NATO parliamentarians from Turkey regularly, and they're fairly friendly. And they understand the power that a $30 trillion economy can bring to the table, as well as the military power. Um, it is important that we stay at least friendly with them to some extent, so we can insert our influence on it. I think eventually, once again, I think they need to get back towards open, democratic, and fair government elections, and I think that could be formative because it used to be one of the most moderate Muslim countries in the world. And matter of fact, in many ways, I mean, they would celebrate Christmas and everything else like that. You're just seeing this kind of extremism continue to pop up throughout the world, and then people get bullied and scared. And when you're killing nuns on the steps of churches, what won't you do? That's just absolute evil, and that's an unfortunate byproduct of that extremism.
Here's a question that many people are curious about the closeness of the Trump administration in Qatar and Qatar's continuation of funding the Muslim Brotherhood and destabilizing the world.
Hmm. I think this is coming to a head. I think most people, I think including the government officials, were unaware of their close ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. They try to play that peacemaker. That they have one foot in each camp. That's impossible to do. This is the time to pick sides, pick friends. President Trump has a lot of unique relationships. Some of them with people that are openly unfriendly to us, whether it be North Korea. Or Kim Jong-un, whether it be Xi Jinping in China, whether it be Putin in Russia. Uh, Trump tries to be friendly with everybody, even the people he doesn't like. You hear him make compliments on people you know are bad people. And that's part of his art of business. But ultimately, we obviously don't trust those guys. Um, I get everybody's consternation on Qatar. I get why they'd be concerned about accepting Air Force One from them. They exert a tremendous influence just through their money raised by oil revenues. Um, Once again, a country that's, I think, to the same level as Turkey and other countries that are kind of on the verge, Pakistan, that we know are bad actors in many ways. once again, having them closer to us and further from the other people allows us to have leverage we otherwise would not. It's not as straightforward as just saying, you're bad, we're good, we're going to go against you. It's not like Tehran where they're openly um, funding one side of this. They're trying to play both sides. We want to bring more to our side to keep them from being openly problematic, like Tehran, making them extreme. And that worked, like, for example, with Saudi Arabia. When I first joined the military, we couldn't get into Saudi Arabia. We had very little influence. The most of the extremists we're dealing with from 9/11 came from Saudi Arabia. They had massive problems. They become more and more Americanized. Their monarchy has become more and more friendly to us. I wouldn't be surprised if they join the Abraham Accords in the next few years. That's because we were patient with them. We didn't alienate them, and I think that's a really important part to remember in this. That this battle is not over in one day. This is through years and years of negotiation and relationships and business dealings. They can bring us closer, but we do know that there's major problems with them, and I think, especially in the conservative movement, I think there's a huge push to distance ourselves, or at least to strong arm the Qataris to do the right thing.
Speaking of the Saudis, the next question was, why is the Saudis blocking the U.S. from using their military bases? Should we go and attack Iran, or are they just trying to play it safe among their people and
Yeah,
tell them
they're
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 supporting them?
afraid. First of all, they're afraid of their own people, that the extreme people who have sympathies for the Shiite population of Iran would cause them significant problems in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia's doing great. They're making a ton of money. Their influence has never been higher than it is right now. They don't want to upset the apple cart. They don't want drones and missiles shot into Saudi Arabia to take out their infrastructure, which they worked very hard to establish. Realize there's nobody putting in a bigger percentage of their GDP towards their military other than Russia right now. Saudi Arabia is number two, and they have a tremendous amount of money. They're building a military. They're trying to become stronger to defend themselves. They've moderated, but Iran has a lot of weapons. They don't want to be put on the same slate as Israel to have weapons pointed towards them if we launch from their bases. You've also heard rumors of Saudi Arabia asking us not to attack Iran. Again, I think you've also heard of Netanyahu doing the same thing. Interesting bedfellows, to say the least. But I think it's in self-interest of their infrastructure and what they have established in their position right now. They just don't want to lose it.
Here's a really interesting question. I think everybody here that's on this webinar wants to know this answer. It's not really dealing with foreign policy, but yet it is. How is the Department of Justice addressing the funding of recent regrettable pro-Hamas activities, especially on college campuses, and the current anti-ICE violence? So I'm going to reword it a little bit. Who is supplying, I'm going to use the term politely, the activists and funding their organizations?
It's not one person. It's a lot of people. Some of them are small dollar bills from people who've been radicalized through the internet and other ways. College campuses, which we've talked about just a little bit ago. We know that there's countries and brotherhoods that literally openly fund this stuff, and that's why we're trying to weed that out. This administration has done a phenomenal job of mincing through where that money is coming from, classifying it as a terrorist organization donation, tracking it back to its origins, and once again, classifying those organizations as basically something we could actually take over their funding if it's based here in the United States. I think we threatened several. I'm trying to think of the word, but basically these commodities that are given to them by donors, trust funds, that we basically said, you're going to have to use all your trust funds. We're going to stop government funding of your university if you're going to use these funds, especially in any way that's anti-Semitic or anti-Israel. And I've been to Cornell a couple times, talked to the president of the university about what they specifically done. It's interesting to hear what they say about their donor class. You speak with your money. So if anybody's out there right now listening that understands that they give to universities, you want to make a statement, call up your whoever's collecting the donations, make sure they get through the president and say, I'm not giving you another dime until you devoid yourself from those sort of dollars. There's a lot of studies on a lot of different universities. It can be researched out there. Happy to work with you guys to give you the funding data from foreign and malicious investors to corrupt anything from our Ivy League schools to our federal schools. And the nice thing is you don't have any independence, even as an independent school, a private school, because you know that the private schools also get federal funds. And if we have federal funds, we can deny that. And you guys can deny your money too as individual investors. And I think that's what people listen to.
We had a couple of questions about potential campaigns that are upcoming, but we're a nonprofit, so we're only not supposed to be discussing elections. Sorry about that, folks. We're asking questions about upcoming elections, and
Well, we
particularly about
can, Mark,
what
just
about
to, we can allow, first of all, I want to make sure that Congressman McCormick has our thanks for so much for answering these questions. But I think it is okay to ask the congressman his opinion as long as it's understood that it does not represent a position or an endorsement by the CJV. You know,
okay.
if he wants to ask an election question, that if somebody wants to ask that, that's fair. That's okay.
It's actually a very good question about the open congressional seat in Georgia
Hmm.
and the concerns about the anti-Semitism that was coming out of that district previously.
Yeah.
And
So that one of the problems with Margaret, she would say she's not anti-Semitic. The problem is that some of the words that came out of her mouth were very problematic. Some of the conspiracy theories. I think most of her what I would think is that came across as anti-Israeli stems from her idealism on isolationism rather than anti-Israelism. In other words, she was against any funds going to Ukraine, even more so than Israel or Taiwan or anywhere in the world. She believes in isolationism openly. But I would quote Reagan from 41 years ago now, at the 40th anniversary of D-Day, where he said, "Isolationism never was and never will be the answer to an expansionist, tyrannical regime." And that includes everything from Russia to Iran to any other oppressive regime. You cannot ignore it. It's just going to get worse. We have to stand up. We have the leading position in the world, whether we like it or not. And we've seen that you can only stay isolated for so long before it comes knocking to your front door. We tried it in World War II. It didn't work. We probably stayed on the sidelines for far too long. It got worse. We have to be involved. I think it's our moral obligation. I think it's also in our best interest economically. And it will cause a lot less. It's a pittance of an investment compared to what you'll have later. As far as that open seat, um, there's definitely some people who try to model themselves after Marjorie Taylor Greene, at least one that's in that race, and that's a concern. Actually, if that person does win, there will be a lot of discussions because that is the biggest concern. I think it's a neck and neck race. I think there's about 15 candidates, three of them in the Republican Party that have a good chance of winning. My biggest concern is that if there's only two Democratic congressmen running or candidates running, and we only get a small fraction for each of the Republicans, that you could actually have two Democrats in a runoff in that. Um, for the same reason you said, but I don't really get involved in endorsements in that election unless it becomes clear cut, because I found that your friends kind of come and go in this business, but your enemies accumulate. And so I think there's a really important reason, or it's an obvious winner. I try to stay out of those elections, although I find I'm getting more and more drawn into these elections, whether I like to or not. It's hard to stay on the sidelines. But I am behind the scenes exerting my influence to the best of my ability to make sure it's somebody who's in line with my political philosophy, which I will say, fortunately, even though I don't take as hard line on a lot of things as other people, I'm probably as conservative as you get. But we also have the best elections in Georgia when objectively. We have the largest Jewish population in Georgia. We have the wealthiest, uh, not only district in Georgia, but the wealthiest Republican district in the United States by median income. We have a huge Indian constituency, a huge Korean constituency. It's a very diverse, 40% minorities. Um, I think it's really important to recognize what works, though. When you outperform, we even outperformed President Trump by 8 points. And here's the good thing: Marjorie Taylor Greene underperformed Trump by 8 points. That's a 16-point spread, showing that our approach to politics, our friendship to Israel, our friendship to a good business environment, which is not isolationist, is actually paying off and people get it, especially the highly educated people.
Here's a question, which is another great question, because a lot of people don't realize the influence that Hezbollah has in Venezuela and South and Central America. If you could give a little explanation of what's actually happening and what they're doing as far as being one of the leading drug cartels in the world.
Yeah, it's no surprise that bad guys use nefarious means to both fund themselves. Drugs are the easiest way to fund it. They have no moral objections, and this is one of the things I worry about when we talk about making a deal with Iran. They will never be honest with us because they're allowed to lie to us. In their book, the Quran, it says you can lie to an infidel. It's no problem. So we can never do an honest deal with them. We can't trust them. They're going to use violence. They're going to use drugs. They're going to use anything they can that can make easy money from us and also harm our society simultaneously. Drugs is the easiest way to do that. It's not so much that they're working with Venezuela, they're working for themselves. Quite frankly, they work with anybody who they can make money off of, anybody who could harm America and Israel, because that's what they do. That's their main purpose in life. The way you defeat that is, once again, track the money. And I think this president's doing a very good job of that.
Here's a question. I'm going to read the whole thing. It's a little lengthy, but the West tried nation building, democratization, and westernization of Afghanistan for 20 years. Now we have an Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan with a Taliban militia that has $8 billion of state and art weaponry. The only thing that Biden ever built back better is the Taliban. Pretty funny. But it's sad. The mullahs must go by revolutions aren't always revolutionary. Syria is a recent case in point. What is, in your opinion, is happening in Syria, and what do you think the outcome is going to be?
Ah, Syria. It's a tough one. This gets back into kind of what I've relayed with all the other countries. Syria obviously has a lot of countries involved in that area, including Turkey. We talked about Turkey before. We also talked about Israel. There's actually, I think, 3 or 4 countries that have portions of Syria under their control. That government start off with all the right rhetoric and they're doing all the wrong things, and they blame it on the fact they can't control. I've told the president that if they can't control their own nation, that we'll be glad to take out some bad guys. We can drop if you can't be violent towards oppressive and horrible people. I'll be happy to step in and place a well delivered tomahawk or bomb to take out those bad guys. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say, "Oh, I want this," but yet I can't do anything to fight the bad guys. So that's one thing I'd say with Syria. As far as Afghanistan goes, that's very personal to me. I spent half a year of my life over there, a 3 month workup, so 9 months away from my family to go to Afghanistan. I was the head of emergency medicine in 2016 over there. I lost friends over there. I've lost people very near and dear to me. And I spent a lot of time away, and I've seen countless brain injuries and traumatic PTSD, limbs lost, years away from our family, 2,462 lives lost. And then we gave it back to the same people we spent 20 years, $2 trillion taking it away from. Whether you like being there or not, we'd paid the price. It was a stable country. It was still corrupt. Their government had massive problems. Anybody who thinks Ukraine is bad, this is 10 times worse. But then we left. We weren't losing people. The Taliban were still killing Afghanis, and there was still a war going on, but it was relatively stable. You had women making progress. People who aren't aware, the Taliban, I mean, the Afghanis during the 60s and early 70s were actually very Americanized. There was women with short skirts and bouffant hairdos working in places. When Russia came there and the Taliban started rising up, they ended up taking the Robin Hood hero position. But that's what kind of created the warlords. And unfortunately, when the warlords weren't acting right and they started oppressing the people, the Taliban came in as an alternative, and then violent people suppress everybody else. It's funny, when I was going over there, somebody asked a question to one of our people giving us prep lecture on it. Why do Afghani people flip-flop all the time? Why do they switch position? Why do sometimes they go with the Taliban, sometimes the warlords, sometimes the United States? They don't seem loyal at all. And he said, because they just want to exist into the next generation, which is most people in this world, by the way, even Palestinians, believe it or not. When you have Hamas pointing a gun at you saying, if you don't believe what we believe, we're going to kill you, you're going to believe whatever they say to believe, because you want your family, you want your generation to be realized 10 years from now. And if you don't, you're done. Your entire family's gone. And that's the one thing we need to take out the fear. We need to stabilize these countries. And when you make an investment, finish the job. Otherwise, don't start it because they're no better off now than they were 20 years ago. And that's what really disappoints me, and it hurts my feelings because I feel like we wasted our time and our efforts and our time away from our families to watch that happen. It's the worst withdrawal of all time.
Um, First, we need one or two more questions. Does anybody else have any more questions? Put it in the chat box, please. Um, and do you have any other remarks you'd like to make, Congressman?
Yeah, if you have any specific questions, you're welcome to reach out to my office anytime. Obviously, Rich McCormick, Congressional District, Georgia 7. We're up in DC. We meet with people regularly. We host things to discuss these sort of issues. I tour. I've gone to everything from AJC, APAC, and just got back from the Israel American Council in Florida. There's no stone left unturned when it comes to these. I know we all have differences of opinion and difference of approach, but I do believe it's one team, one fight against a common enemy. You see divisions inside of America, inside of the Republican Party with the Freedom Caucus, the moderates, also inside of churches, inside the Christian faith. So we're no different from anything else. We're always going to have divisions, but that's okay. And actually, it's very healthy. I'm glad that we're able to have differences because whether it be in your synagogue, your temple, your church, your government, if everybody's agreeing with one person, it's a cult. And usually that's the most dangerous of all. Anybody who's read Gulag Archipelago knows how fast things can get out of hand. That's why I'm very much for limited government, controlled government, giving people back their choices and making sure that our central government is for one thing, to protect our populace, no matter who you are, and to make sure that your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is secured.
Okay, this will be the last question then. Uh, I'm going to read this one word for word. The role that the combination of the Mullah regime, pseudo-theocratic nature, inelasticity of their hostility, coupled with the revolutionary disruptive technologies, Silex, ability of the Mullah regime, ability to reconstitute their nuclear capability very quickly. And I think in essence what he's saying, if we don't take out Iran now, it's not going to be a very good future.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. You used some big words there. I'm just a Marine, crayon
Yep.
Marine, but I couldn't agree with you more. I applaud what the president did before. That's one of the reasons I think the Tehran regime needs to be taken out. They'll never be truthful. They'll never be honest. They'll always be building towards a nuclear Iran because they know that would be much more difficult Iran to attack than a non-nuclear Iran. So that's ultimately their plan. They're within weeks of a nuclear weapon. They can be there instantaneously. Our information is not always going to be good. They're very, very paranoid. But this is a regime that has to be toppled, and there's never been a better time than now. I'll double down on that all day long until it's done. There's nothing that this regime can say that would make me feel good except for we're leaving. And they need to be gone because they're evil and they will do harm. And if they get nuclear arms, God help us and God help Israel.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate you coming on, and your talk was very informative. And I'm sure most people learned a lot today.
Well,
Thank
thanks
you.
for having me on. Like I said, reach out to me anyways, anytime. God bless you and Semper Fidelis.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much, Congressman.
My pleasure.